Al-Jafari affirms that the states calling for arming the opposition are working to foil Annan's mission. Lavrov says Russia opposes any deadline or ultimatum to be included in Annan's mission on Syria. Israeli occupation authorities refuse to allow Golan farmers from shipping their apples into Syria. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our news for today. Syria's permanent representative to the UN, Dr. Bashar al-Jafari, has affirmed that the countries which try to arm the terrorists in Syria and supply them with funds and communication equipment are working to foil the UN envoy to Syria, Mr. Kofi Annan's mission, let alone that they are violating Syria's sovereignty. During a press conference he held at the UN headquarters in New York yesterday, al-Jafari said the Syrian government does not accept what it refused before, adding that it has always reiterated the presence of armed groups, which Annan's plan openly refers to. Al-Jafari pointed out that Syria is doing its best to render successful Mr. Annan's mission, as he is working with the officials in Syria regularly. He stressed that both sides have common ground and the best mechanisms are made available for their work to be under the supervision of Syrian sovereignty in order to implement the 6-point plan. Al-Jafari said Syria expects the same kind of commitment for the success of the plan by Mr. Annan and the members of the UN Security Council. Al-Jafari added that in diplomatic work no preconditions should be imposed, and the important thing is to protect Syria's sovereignty. The UN envoy to Syria, Mr. Kofi Annan, has submitted his report on his mission to Syria to the UN Security Council in a closed session. Annan said Syria has agreed to the plan but waits for the opposition's commitment to halt violence and withdraw the armed terrorist groups.
But we are working it out.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has stressed his country's opposition to any deadline or ultimatum to be introduced into Mr. Kofi Annan's plan on Syria. Lavrov said the plan should be assessed by the UN Security Council and not by the so-called Friends of Syria meeting. He affirmed that Russia will be the friend of all the Syrian people, not only for one segment of it. The Russian minister branded as dangerous the stand of the so-called Friends of Syria meeting in recognizing some opposition groups as being representative of the Syrian people. He added that such a stand contravenes with Annan's efforts to find a peaceful solution to the crisis. Lavrov said his country intends to receive 2 delegations representing various factions of the opposition in the near future. He expressed hope that all those who show keenness on the Syrian people and on the destiny of Syria, its neighbors, and the region as a whole would enjoy the highest sense of responsibility, particularly when they work out steps that do not help implement UN Council's resolutions. He warned that the region as a whole is witnessing a very grave complication and that the situation there is on the verge of explosion. Calling for full implementation of Annan's 6-point plan, Mr. Lavrov hoped some Western and Arab countries would send a clear signal to the armed groups that are carrying acts of violence on Syrian territories to take effective and rapid steps in order to stop violence and secure the full implementation of Annan's 6-point plan. The Russian Deputy Foreign Minister, Mr. Gennady Gatilov, has said his country believes many Syrians do not consider the so-called Friends of Syria group as their real friend and do not regard the group positively. In a comment published on his Twitter website today, Gatilov said the protests staged by several Syrians in Istanbul against the meeting show that many Syrians do not consider the group as their friend. Gatilov called on all parties to support the UN Special Envoy to Syria, Kofi Annan's mission. Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallim today met Chairman of the Red Cross International Committee Jacob Klimberger in the presence of head of the Syrian Red Crescent Organization Dr. Abdurrahman al-Attar. Minister al-Muallim surveyed the details of the committee's work and its needs regarding humanitarian activity on Syrian territories. He reaffirmed Syria's constant efforts to provide whatever is needed in order to render the International Committee's work successful as far as its humanitarian mission is concerned, and in coordination with the Syrian Red Crescent Organization. Agreement was reached on the mechanism of cooperation and direct coordination between the Red Cross International Committee and the Syrian Red Crescent Organization on the one hand and the Foreign and Expatriates Ministry on the other. For his part, Mr. Klemberger expressed appreciation for the Syrian authorities' cooperation with the committee and for allowing it to access to affected areas as a result of the current events. In Homs, the authorities have found a stolen Land Rover car belonging to the General Establishment of Communications near Al-Muthanna School in Al-Marji neighborhood. The car, which was used by armed terrorist groups to spread panic among citizens, was provided with platforms to launch mortar shells. A delegation representing the Syrian community in Sweden expressed upon their arrival at Damascus International Airport their adherence to homeland and their rejection of all attempts to target Syria's unity. Members of the delegation expressed their solidarity with Syria and their support of national resistance against all forms of colonialism. The visit is scheduled for 7 days, during which the delegation will get acquainted with the facts on the ground, away from media fabrications and lies.
We came here to support the Syrian people. Our hearts and feelings go with our homeland and our people.
We want to build bridges of cooperation between Syrian communities abroad and our Syrian citizens inside the country.
Our visit to Syria is designed to offer moral support to our country and our martyrs who sacrificed their life for the sake of the homeland.
Finally, Israeli occupation authorities prevented farmers of occupied Golan from shipping their apples to their motherland, Syria. Baqata, head of Apple's shipping committee, Said Farhat, stressed that the Israeli practices will not succeed in preventing the Golan inhabitants from continuing their struggle to restore their rights and affirm their adherence to Syrian national identity. For his part, engineer Hussein Arnous, governor of Al-Quneitra, called on international organizations and the humanitarian bodies to put pressure on Israeli authorities in order to allow Syrian farmers in occupied Golan to transfer their apples into the motherland, Syria. With this, we end our news bulletin for today. For more news about Syria and the region, you can visit our website in English, syriaonline.sy.